Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm your host, Mike Malatesta. I'm an entrepreneur who's founded and led 2 8-figure companies. I'm also an investor, author, speaker, and lifetime learner. On this podcast, I explore stories of success in every episode and with every guest. What it means, why it's important, and of course, how it happens. You can subscribe, connect, and learn more about me at MikeMalatesta.com. Before we start today's episode, I wanted to tell you about 2 quick things. First, thanks to you, this podcast is in the top 2.5% of all podcasts in the world. My goal is to earn my way into the top 1% group. You can help me with this by sharing episodes and leaving reviews. Second, my new book is going to launch on November 30th, 2021. It's called Ownership. The subtitle is How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. I'll let you know more about how you can get it as we get closer to launch. Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I am so grateful to have you listening, subscribing, and sharing all the episodes that I put out. And this one is one you're definitely going to do at least 2 of those 3 things with. You're going to want to listen and you're going to want to share. Because today I've got Rob LoCascio with me. Rob is the founder of LivePerson, Inc., which is a NASDAQ traded company, and has been its chief executive officer since its inception in 1995. Rob, when you started, was it just you, or did you have a little team, or just you?
Just me, yeah.
Phenomenal. One person. So Rob is the guiding force behind the company's vision of creating meaningful connections between brands and consumers. LivePerson has come a long way since its early years, having survived the dot-com crash, congratulations, and grown to become the leader in intelligent engagement solutions, currently serving over 18,000 clients with something like 1,200 employees and offices across the globe. And here's the biggest thing. Rob is one of the longest-standing CEOs of a tech company today, which is amazing because most people can't make the leap, Rob, right? They can't just keep going from one person to 1,200 people, and so congratulations on that. Rob's interests extend beyond his business and reflect his close ties to New York City. He is a founding member of the New York City Entrepreneurs Council of the Partnership for New York City. I think I got that right. In 2001, he started the Dream Big Foundation with its first program, Feeding New York City, which gives families in need a Thanksgiving dinner. And to date, they've donated more than 40,000 meals. That's awesome. And the Dream Big Entrepreneurship Initiative, which was launched in 2014 to fund, mentor, coach, and empower local entrepreneurs in underserved communities. Rob's also a founding member of Equal AI, which I want to talk about today, which works with companies, policymakers, and experts to reduce bias in AI. And last but not least, Rob also invented the use of real-time chat for customer care on the internet, believe it or not. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, when I first learned that you created the real-time chat, I thought, oh my gosh, because I'm like a chat phobic, I guess. I don't like chat intimidates me, but I have to say that when I've done it with some big companies like Amazon and a couple others, the chat actually works really good, better than talking to a customer service person somewhere. So I'm excited to understand how you got that from starting it to where it is now. But let's get started with how I start every podcast, Rob, and that's with a simple question. How did it happen for you?
Well, I mean, I started this company was my second company. My first company, I started out of college, and it was an interactive kiosk company, like touchscreens. And I got out of college, so I thought this could be pretty cool for college campuses. I didn't have a technology background. I had English literature. And so I guess the way I always kind of feel is that for every entrepreneur, it's like you have a purpose in life, and you just have these things that come in your brain. You can't explain why you have these thoughts, and then you think, oh, this is a really cool idea, and there's a need in the world. Usually entrepreneurs feel like there's this need, and that becomes your purpose. And so, my first company kind of set me on the path of being an entrepreneur. It went under in 1995 and I lost everything. And then I started this company, and I started by sleeping on a couch in a sublet office space of a guy who made t-shirts in New York City. And I didn't have enough money for a apartment in an office. So I chose office. And then I ended up sleeping there, and I had to get a health club membership so I could take a shower at the health club because they didn't have a shower. It was like there's a bathroom in the hallways, a loft in Tribeca. So, how did it get started? It's like I have sort of like this belief in God and faith and purpose, and that's how I think most things get started for people in the world.
And Rob, when you started your first company, you said it was a touch screen kiosk. So like I'm thinking like you see those all over the place now in the airports, and
Yeah.
McDonald's even has a touch screen kiosk when you go in there to order. What were you seeing as an opportunity back? This was in the late 80s or early
This is
90s?
1991.
1991. So early 90s. What were you seeing as a college student where you were thinking to yourself, oh, the world needs touchscreen kiosks?
I actually was thinking, first I had a job out of college and I got fired in 6 months. So that gave me an impression that working for somebody is not a really great thing. And I didn't do anything to get fired. Just they downsized. They were a big company and I was in a little division, and I was hired out of college. So when they were downsizing, they downsized me first. The thing is, I remember advertising seemed really cool back then. And there was some TV show, I forgot the name of it, that it just seemed like a cool thing and a very creative thing. And I've always been a creative person. So I wrote down, basically, um, I want to be in advertising. And then I remember seeing these kiosks in the World Financial Center. And somehow I was connecting the two, like, what if you could do advertising on these things? And that sort of set me on the journey. Now, I saw digital video. I ended up finding my way to digital video, which didn't exist back then. But I found a small mom and pop that basically were doing training of the military down in Washington, D.C. And they were using this digital video technology. I thought, wow, this is cool. And basically, I was going after it and thought, I'm going to build this. And I had no idea about technology. I had to learn how to program. And that set me on the path of digital media and technology. And then from there, when I saw the internet happen in 1995, I knew that the kiosk business would not last because you could access what was in these kiosks were in student union buildings. You could access it in your dorm rooms, yeah. And the students we would end up going under. So that's kind of why I made a big pivot.
And were you bootstrapping? Was that a bootstrapped business, or was it something that had grown to the point where you had other investors, or what were you doing?
No, yeah, I had friends and family and stuff, but back in the 90s, like there wasn't venture capital like there is today. I mean, so I put $50,000 on credit cards because I had these credit cards out of college, and I funded it through credit cards. And then when it went under, I lost all my credit cards. My credit rating went to like 0. And I wasn't forced to go to bankruptcy because I had no assets as a kid out of college. But and then I just kind of picked myself up and moved to New York. I was in Baltimore at the time, moved to New York City, and that's where I started LivePerson. It wasn't called LivePerson at the time, but then I didn't have any clue about the product that we would end up, launching us to where we are today, the chat product. But I started to build websites. I just thought, I'll create websites for small businesses, and that's how I got started.
Okay, so you were just creating websites at a time when probably hardly anybody had a website, or they had something, one page or something like that, and
that's correct. And e-commerce was starting to happen. So, what happened was small businesses are always the first in, and they were like, "Oh, I want to build a website to sell my products on." So we had like a company called iBeauty that sold, beauty products, and we had an ISP on there, and we had different small businesses that wanted e-commerce, wanted to try e-commerce.
And what was life like for you before before college, Rob, where'd you grow up, and what was ultimately I want to get to what did your parents think when you maxed out these credit cards as a just graduated college student, but
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on Long Island. I come from a line of entrepreneurs. So my dad was an entrepreneur. My grandparents were entrepreneurs. My grandfathers, my cousins were entrepreneurs today. Like somehow everyone on the LoCascio side and my mom's side and the Mordino side, like just I don't know. We often say like we never thought we were good enough to get a job, so we started our own business. They've all had small businesses. Like my dad had a series of small businesses, that kind of was, I learned, there was a big impression on me about the ups and downs of building a company. And, every 5 years, my dad would have a new company because I think he liked the thrill of it. But that up and down left a lasting impression on me. And I guess the reason I've stayed with one company is kind of challenging myself not to have that life. And I wanted to stick with something and see if I could build it and see, like I could build a startup. Like I know I could build a startup without thinking. I know what it takes to do that. I can build a company to $500 million because that's what we do today. But can I build a company to 10 billion in revenue or 2 billion in revenue? I have no idea. And so I wake up because the challenge of that is really what's quite exciting. So.
And did you, with your dad sort of changing businesses every few years, did that bring pressure into your life? You were saying, I didn't want to do that or go through that. Was it, because, it can be tough starting something new every 5 years. It can be.
Yeah, it brought a lot of, I think it brought a lot of pressure on the family. There were times we didn't have money, times we had money. One day we had a Jaguar. I remember the next day we had a Pinto, Ford Pinto. It was like this type of, stuff. And I think for my dad, he just got bored, like he said it once, like I would just get bored and then he would blow up the company. And I think it was, for some entrepreneurs, my dad loved creating things. He was an extraordinary human being on creating things out of nothing. He was in computers early on in the 80s. He was in the credit bureau business. He was in plastics in the 60s and he would get them to a certain place. It's funny because if you can get through the first 5 years, usually stuff starts to happen. It's funny because right when stuff would start to happen, like you get some real stability.
Yeah.
Actually would just blow it up and try something new. And he up until he died, he was like selling, he came out with these pans from Italy he was importing. So, I admired my father. My father really made me understand what it takes to build a business. My grandfather on my mom's side shared a lot of stories. My grandfather, my dad's side also. And I learned a lot from my family about what it takes. And it's a pretty simple equation, building companies. Like I have to be able to get up in the morning and do my job and do it well and put in the time. And where I lack on experience, I can make up for commitment. I can work harder and longer than anyone else.
Right.
Because I have a commitment. And a lot of people, they just want to work 9 to 5 or whatever. And that's fine. I'm not criticizing it. But I know I don't know everything and I have to learn. And the only way I can learn is by putting in a lot of extra hours. And if I put in the extra hours, good things will happen. God takes care of you.
That's funny what you said about your dad and plastics, because it reminded me of the movie The Graduate, where the guy in there gives Dustin Hoffman that advice, right? It's like, future is plastics or something like that. I'm butchering the line, I'm sure, but
he says, he goes, the future is plastics,
Yeah.
And so like my dad was literally in the 60s, in late 60s, early 70s. This is when that was the technology.
Right.
And him and his brother started a company for vacuum forming for the cosmetics industry. And it's extraordinary what they were doing with that business. And then it blew up, like we got acquired. It was like this thing my dad, just blew it out. And once again, I don't have any ill will towards my father. I'm very lucky to have the father I had. I learned a lot from his mistakes, which, it's like, and I learned a lot about his passion for business. So having those two, like, there's a lot I picked up that like I didn't have to learn when I started my business.
Right. And when you were in college, you mentioned English Lit was your major. My major was English as well. So I'm curious how you came to choose that as your major, because I'll share with you how I came to choose it as well.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I mean, I did sort of a dual. I did English literature, and then I got my ultimate degree is the Bachelor in Business Administration and Marketing.
Okay.
So and I got both. And so yeah, I was a really I was a bad student in high school, and most teachers didn't like me. And I was a class clown. I just was so bored. I had to make my own excitement. And so I would get thrown out of class, and I had a teacher though, this Sister Mary. I went to Catholic school, who saw something in me. There were two people in high school who saw something into me out of everyone I met, and one was my tennis coach. I ended up going to tennis, Dr. Walter Lace, and my other one was this Sister Mary something, and Donovan or something, and she was English literature, and she got me into reading, and I fell in love with books. I remember reading The Catcher in the Rye and all that stuff. That was kind of our book of our generation. And
Yeah, sure.
right, and I
Yeah.
was so fascinated. And then when I went to college, there was such a great group of professors in there, and I ended up going English literature, I focused on the romantic writers, Wordsworth, Coleridge. That's the group that I really got focused on. I really just fell in love with their poetry, and I realized the power of the written word, and language, and so that's really the reason I got into it. She saw something and gave me books and said, read books, maybe you'll be interested in this. But she
Yeah.
didn't. Most teachers, like, you saw, like, they were just annoyed by me and like threw me out of class. She was like, there's something here with this kid.
Well, I wish I had a story that was like where I had a mentor and inspirer, but I actually chose English because it was really the only thing I could do was read books and write about them. Everything else I was in, I was like, math, and I don't know, I can do it, but it didn't feel very good. So, but in retrospect, and I wonder how you feel about this, because liberal arts now get a lot of, STEM is sort of a big focus now, and liberal arts is sort of poo-pooed in a lot of areas. But how did that experience and that training and that exposure help you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I went to Loyola University, which is a liberal arts school, a Jesuit school, and it's full liberal arts. And I remember I had my first history professor, Stephen Gazlazov. But I remember the first day of class, and this guy was so cool. It was like exactly what you expect, professor. He had a beret on when he came in, and he did his PhD. Got his thesis was in Italian dueling, was what he got. Like, this guy
Italian
was a
duel,
real dueling.
really?
Yeah, Lily. Shoot, shoot.
It's a-
Did a
yeah.
whole. That was his PhD. So he's a real Renaissance dude, but he had the hat and the big trench coat, and I mean, he's just like, it was like a perfect professor. And he came in the first day. He said, "Look, I'm going to tell you what this is all about. Your college experience, especially this class. Um, you're going to be at a cocktail party one day. Trust me, somewhere in your life when you grow up, and someone's going to talk about some topic, and your ability to just talk about that topic on some base level will make your life extraordinary. You will get places in the world. So, like, I'm going to teach about dueling. We're going to teach about all sorts of things. You're going to be trust me, you'll be in a cocktail party. Someone's going to be like, don't talk about dueling. You're like, oh yeah, I know about dueling. I know about language. I know about the romantic writers. I know about philosophy. I know. And I remember I was like, it stuck in my head, like, oh man, that's, if anything, that's a good idea. So
That is brilliant. It's and so true. And my wife actually says that to me sometimes. She's like, "How do you know about all of these different things?" And I go, "I don't know anything. I just happen to know a little bit about a whole bunch of stuff, enough so that I can at least engage. If you go really deep, I'm just going to listen because I have to learn. Otherwise, but yeah, and I always thought like it trained you to think through something before you acted on it, because in English lit, you're always trying to understand what the author was saying, and oftentimes he or she is not saying what they're saying. They're presenting it in the language or the words that they use, and it's not obvious. And so it gives you the opportunity to really think about something and then be able to argue it or take a position on either side, because you're able to think through it very, I think, carefully. And anyway, that's what I don't know if you feel that way or not, but I felt like that gave me a strength.
Yeah, and I think for running a company, also there's a diversity of ideas, there's a diversity of people, and so when you think about like bringing liberal arts thinking, and a lot of it is questioning, a lot of it is, especially the Jesuit upbringing, is sort of like you question everything, including religion. Like that, there was
Right.
always a question about the Catholic Church, even though it's a Catholic order. It was always kind of a thorn in the side of the Vatican stuff, even though the current Pope is a Jesuit. It was, we'd question that, and so you got to be able to question. And the most important thing I found in running a company is questioning yourself. Is there's healthy doubt and there's unhealthy doubt, and so your ability to question what your what your um, interpretation is of things. Like maybe you're not interpreting things right
Right.
because you have a filter on
Yeah.
of your past experiences. So you have to be very careful to always be reworking your belief system of what things are.
I went to Catholic school as well, grade school at least, and then I went to a high school that was Episcopalian. It wasn't religious, but we had to go to chapel 3 times a week. And what was kind of neat about it, from coming from a Catholic background, is it's exactly like a Catholic mass or a Catholic service, except you don't have to kneel down. So that was like the only difference, and it was kind of an interesting thing for me as I was growing up. The first job you got fired from, Rob, 6 months in, they downsized, they got rid of you. Do you think if things had been different, you might have stayed and been not? I always wonder kind of what you had the entrepreneurial family, and maybe you had that in your genes and stuff. But I always wonder a little bit, if things had worked out differently and the company, you know, you you grew in it, and I don't even know if it's a fair question, but what do you think? You think you could have ever stayed as an employee, or?
I don't. I kind of don't. I don't. I don't look at the path like this. I don't think you. I think you. I think this concept of happiness and sadness is your guiding point, or
Hmm.
happiness and something else, frustration, or whatever you want to say, is your guide to, am I doing the right thing? I go back to my thing. I truly believe, and I learned this back when I was 40. When I was 40, I basically learned, I went to an ashram in India and learned how to meditate and stuff. I just ended up there on my birthday. And this ashram, what I learned, it's kind of the Hindu, fundamentals, is that inside of us is our purpose. And there's a great story that I remember at the ashram that they told, that one time there were only gods in the world, but there was a set of gods that were going to get put down on earth and become physical beings. And gods were deciding, though, we don't want to have these people have access to that type of godlike power, like right off the bat. So one god turns to the other one and says, how do we hide it from them? What do we do? And the one turns to the other and says, well, let's put it in a place that's really hard to find. And the other one said, where's that? And he said, within. We'll stick it straight within the human.
Hmm.
Put them down there, because it's hard to look within. And when you think about what I learned is, like, and this is what meditation does, like we all have what we call gut, our voice, we call it the gut.
Yeah.
And then we have active thinking, but the gut is a very powerful thing. And a lot of times we question it because we can't see it. But I do believe that we've all been put on earth with a purpose, that the gut and that voice is telling us what we should be doing. We inherently will go against it because we have free will and we make decisions with our brains. And those brains, unfortunately, are influenced by external forces like our families, friends, and society. And we tend to question it. So what happens then? We stay on a path that we're unhappy. And the extreme example of that is people self-medicate. drugs, alcohol, whatever, they could end up in a situation of suicide. Not everyone, I'm not saying that some people have mental disease. I understand that. But I'm saying, like, the path of unhappiness and not listening to your voice is a place that you can decide to live there. I don't think I ever would have lived there. And I don't live there today. And it's not like I'm different than any other human. I just choose not to live there. I don't want to live there. Now, there are times when I was younger that I really had a lot of doubt about my inner voice, and I questioned it a lot. And other people, professionals, especially, I was 33 years old when I went public. I was very young. I was 27 when I started the business. And especially when I went public, people telling me stuff. I hired professional managers telling me I'm not, you don't really, I remember I had a guy who ran, so he told me all the things I had to change, and you've never done this before. And he put a lot of doubt in my head. I find, by the way, shitty people, I'm using that word specifically, shitty people show up in your life and love to put doubt in your head. And sometimes you're looking like, well, that's true and this is true. People who are there to help you and you can help them, they're there to help guide, like put good things in your head. Or they want to put a lot of doubt in your head, usually for their own purpose. This is what I've found. They want to put fear, doubt, and uncertainty in your head. If you listen to your inner voice, it'll all be okay. And over time, when I've had difficult decisions to make, I just sit quiet. The voice tells me what to do. Whether I like to do it or not, I'm going to do it. And when I do it, things have worked out for me over 25 years of running the business.
Right. And there's a lot of good stuff there, Rob. So this shitty people thing, when you say that, I see someone who wants power over you by trying to, so if they knock you down, they elevate themselves. That's kind of the way their mind works. And so I'm wondering how you dealt with that and got past it at some point, because that's something that, kind of like what you said about, external things in your brain mess with your gut. So you were kind of, at least if I heard you right, you were kind of saying your brain is kind of like, is your gut without the external forces. So it's you, pure and simple. Like, this makes sense to me. This doesn't make sense to me. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's just kind of what I heard. I don't know if it's right or not.
Well, yeah, but the voice never sits in the brain. If you really meditate, the voice, it's somewhere. It's never a cerebral event. You close your eyes and you quiet your mind down and you hear this thing talking to you, and it tells you, like, you're okay, or you're not okay.
You're not okay.
Or
yeah. Okay.
So when I have to make hard decisions, I sit silent and try to get rid of the active voice, which is like, your active voice. It's that thing that you're hearing other people's voices. He or she said this to me. My family has this belief system that I've got in my head. My dad's like this. My mom, you understand? Yeah. There's a lot connected to other people's ideas, and you make them your own, like cognitively. But inside, you hear this voice that is your voice. It actually is you. It sounds exactly like you. That's why it's you saying it's okay in your voice. Hard to do, by the way. I learned this trick when I did this thing in the ashram, because for years I struggled with it for many years.
Yeah, I think so that's got me in it. I think we all struggle with it. So what led you to the ashram? You said, I just happened to show up there on my 40th, but something led you there. There was.
I had a bad personal breakup in a relationship. I was engaged to someone, and it was really dumb. I was in this relationship in the end. Now I can look back and laugh at it, for a lot of wrong reasons. And when that ended, it ended poorly, and it was really painful. The pain's instructive. This is the one thing I've learned too, is like, the pain is very instructive. And so when I have experienced pain, emotional pain, and I learned this from this therapist, Dr. Frank Morio. I have a podcast too that I do, that I interviewed him on. It's called Over the Wall, not to plug it, but he talks about this. But he taught me, he said, the pain of failure and the embarrassment of failure, but really the pain is instructive. Don't medicate it. And medicate it could be, don't look for distraction, and sit with it. listen to it. It's a bit instructive. And so when I ended this relationship and I was in this pain, something told me I got to figure out why I had a lot of doubt with this person and why I let it go on. And then ultimately it created a lot of pain for me. It wasn't even like at the time I was single till a couple of years ago. So I had girlfriend stuff and some of it would come and people would come and go, but this left a scar on me.
Right.
And I ended up at this ashram. Actually, I was on a plane next to a guy, and I was talking about 6 months from now, it was my birthday coming up, and we became good friends. And I said, I'm trying to find a place in the world to go. I was going from Israel to Istanbul at the time. He was on the shot, and he goes, "Oh my God, I just came back from this place, this ashram." He showed me pictures. So like it was given to me as a gift, and I ended up there, and then it taught me a lot. But it's hard. We used to term it for me the gray-haired old man is what we used to term the type of person who would show up that I would willingly give up my decision making to.
Gotcha.
But I will say one big marker is we as humans, especially if you're like high achieving and you're trying to build things, we tend to be pretty hard on ourselves. We don't need anyone else being hard on us. And if somebody shows up and they're hard on you, and it's a very fine line because some people want to be honest with you and you need the honest feedback. But there's a difference between honest feedback that's loving and caring, and there's honest feedback that's controlling and hurtful. And you'll know because when you meet people who want to give you honest feedback that are good souls, you feel like, God, I'm learning something and I'm okay with it. The people who don't, you go home and you feel lousy. You feel lousy about yourself. You feel worse about yourself than you did in the morning. And no one has the right to do that. So now when it happens, I put Teflon up. I'm like, nice to meet you, and go fuck yourself. You know, like I got it. You've got a motive, and I get it. And it doesn't fit where I want to go in life. That's okay. I have to respect it, but I'm not inviting you in. You don't get an invitation into my life now.
You know, so the word manipulation came into my mind when you were talking about that, but do you find this? Because I find this. People who first thing out of their mouth is, that's, I just tell it like it is. I'm just, and I always think to myself, if you have to provide that intro to me to put me on warning that that's what you do, I am immediately thinking that the next thing you're going to say is complete bullshit, because people who really want to tell you like it is first listen, right? They first, and no one says, it's sort of like, can I be honest with you? Well, if you're saying, can I be honest with you? What am I supposed to make of that? Like, like, should I say, okay, this time please be, but otherwise don't? So I'm always confounded by those kinds of things, and especially people who say they wear that like a chip on their shoulder or some badge of courage or something, like, I'm just gonna give it to you straight, man. I'm just gonna tell you how it is. But that's all you're telling me is what you think. That doesn't. Why should that mean something to me just because you tell me that's the truth? How do you know what the truth is?
Well, and I think, look, there's a few different, especially running a company with a bunch of people, and you're going through change. Like, I've been around long enough. I've seen massive change in our company. Like every 5 to 7 years, you're gonna change.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, change is upon you. Unless you're not growing. If you're growing, you're gonna face something. It could be competitors. It could be new opportunities. It could be macro events like COVID or financial crisis or 9/11 or the internet bubble. I've lived through all of those. The tricky one is people you've hired that did really well for a couple of years, and now your inner self and your strategy has changed, and you need them to change. And what I've found is there are many times that then they go into a mode of trying to then stop. Doesn't serve them.
Right.
And that's the tricky one. And so where I found with that one is that it takes time to work through somebody out of the company sometimes. Like, you can't, if they're important people too, you just can't fire them tomorrow. And you want to give them a chance, but you have to go through with a very stoic perspective, as in, I say, they're not going to be here. So no matter what they do, their job right now is to only do one thing to me personally, is to take my energy. They want to engage me in stuff that'll distract me from my goal.
Right.
Because if they can distract me, they can keep me where I am, where they want to stay. So if you take a point like, just don't get engaged. Don't be engaged in the dialogue. Go like, that's good. But if you go to, and then you go to bed at night, and you're like, well, my goal today is not to get distracted. My goal is to stay focused. And who's ever with me is going to keep me focused. And who's not is going to distract me. Therefore, I've got to minimize them as a human being in the company, as a person, as a leader, say. It's not a nice thing to do, but it's a necessary thing to do to change over 25 years.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Because as you were talking, I was thinking, it's like, well, thank you for sharing that with me. And then I'm moving on. So you want me to come back at you and say, no, you're right. You should be. And it's like, yeah, no. But yeah, so you've had to learn. Well, first of all, you mentioned the Teflon thing, Rob. So when these gray-haired old men come to you now, and you're aware, right? You're aware of what's going on. How do you deploy the Teflon shield, and how do you make it, get those people away from you?
It's engagement. It's really, we have choices of engagement. We decide. The only choice we really have, I always think it's really interesting, like if somebody is not being a positive force in your life, you have one big choice, and that's not to engage with them. And
Right.
very rarely, I've only had a few employees in my life that ended poorly, and I was amazed. And it's funny because there's an example of one of someone, and I remember only a couple of years ago, he came back to someone in the company to potentially sell his company to our company. He went and ended up in another company. The company really didn't work out. He had a big ego, thought he could be president of a company and CEO. He had always a big ego. He was never cut out. But he took the journey. I thought it was very impressive.
Right.
Did not end well with me. I won't engage him. He's emailed me 1,000 times. Went to some of the companies that they wanted me to look at the company. I had a choice. You lost the privilege. So like we have choices of who we hang out with. And you're better off. There are a lot of people. What I found is that if you fill your space, you only have a limited amount of time and space. You decide who you're filling it with. Fill it with people who are going to make you happy, who are going to really help you feel excited. If you have a couple of people in there that don't, you got to ask yourself, why are they there? What is their purpose? Why do I feel that way? You have a choice. You can take the call or not. You can take the meeting or not. You can engage with them or not.
Right. I always, when people are sort of, especially at leadership level where they're sitting around and they're sort of complaining about people that are on the team, I've learned this over the years. I always say, well, you invited them on the team, right? They didn't like bang down the door and take you hostage. You invited them on the team, and now here you are saying you don't want them on the team. Well, if that's what you really don't want them on the team, then take them off the team. Otherwise, win with the team you have. It's
Yeah.
drives me nuts.
We always called it not once again. I'm actually not super Catholic as a religion, but I sort of grew up in that. We always called it. I had some guys that work with, like, we call it the Jesus complex. Like, you always have in your mind the person who could fill that role, who's like walks on water, and they're perfect. Like if that person wasn't here, they have like the perfect person. And a lot of times you create this, like it's a Frankenstein of perfection, and they're human beings. There are very few perfect people in the world. I think maybe Buddha was one of them and stuff. Like the perfection of a being. So
Right.
you sort of deal with what you got, and building a team is about finding people that complement each other's weaknesses, and then helping people to maybe build through those weaknesses.
Yes.
But you can't find someone who's perfect. And when they show up and you think they're perfect, they're going to let you down. Trust me, they will let you down. I mean, I let people down. I know that. There are people who I remember, somewhere in my 30s, late 30s, I was about 34 years old. And no, I was about 37 years old. And I came to the conclusion that it's okay letting people down. that I can't, um, that people are going to be let down by me, and that's okay. That also people will be hurt by me. I will do things and say things to them that will hurt them. So on one level, I have the power to say I'm sorry, and I think for a leader, the the power of it of I'm sorry is very powerful because I know I can make mistakes, but I have the power to correct them. If I'm authentically apologizing for what I've done,
Right.
I find people are okay with it. So whether you screamed at somebody once or whatever, I'm not talking about something like horrific, right? I'm talking about like in the bounds of what's you're working, you get excited, you scream. It's a lot of it's that. You usually get intense, like what you're and you go off the handle. To try not to do that too many times, but it happens. And sometimes you're like, you gotta just say I'm sorry, and that's okay. It gives you power, to move forward.
Yeah, and it's especially okay if over the period of time you've built a lot of trust in the bank with these people, so they know that everything you're doing out of care for the mission or whatever, not because think they're you're not directing it at the person, you're directing it at the situation for maybe so they understand. Hey, Rob's not like that all the time. Rob's done a lot of great stuff for me. So if this happens every so often, that happens. It's human. That's the way it goes, and I'm okay with it,
Yeah,
or I'll get
that's
over
it.
it.
That's it. So once again, it's a tricky thing, like I've learned things for myself. There's tools I use for myself that work for me. But I think basics are hang out with people that you feel like you're positive with, that get you excited, you know, bring them along on the journey and live with your inner voice, your purpose in life, and you'll be happy. That's it's hard, but you'll be happy.
Well, I know. So this is weird because we're kind of bumping up against the time that we have due to a little scheduling snafu that we had, and I haven't talked to you at all about chat or LivePerson or anything because you've been so fascinating on the other stuff. But I feel like I should ask, because I'm really curious about how you invented chat because like I told you at the beginning, I'm kind of like I'm amazed by it. Before I was kind of scared by it, but where did it come from? This your kiosk 2.0 idea.
Yeah. So it was now it was pretty obvious, but I was building websites, right? And then our customers started to say, we'd look at customer support. So I'm selling a product, and back then there was a lot of voice calls, as in people were looking at a website and they couldn't figure out, they would hang up their dial-up connections back then, and they would call the company on the 800 number and talk to them, and you would lose the connection. So our customers started to talk about like the website's good, but they get a lot of phone calls. And I started to think, I remember, it's just so strange. I remember it like it was yesterday. In 1995, in 93, I saw the internet, but it wasn't what it was until 95 was where commerce started to happen. I remember logging back. I looked at it in 93 and I was like, this is a joke. We're doing digital video on kiosks, not links on pages. 95, HTML, Netscape browser, like pictures, like, yeah, commerce.
Right.
When I first logged in 95, I never forget this day. IBM had a website and it was like a Yahoo at the time, believe it or not. IBM, so I had an IBM computer and you logged in, you ended up on this IBM portal, called the portal, and it was a website of like links to companies. They're actually trying to do like a Yahoo. And I remember and clicking around. I remember thinking like, where's all the people? At that time, there were millions of people on it, not like today. There's a lot more today. I was like, where's all the people? And I felt really alone. Plus, I was in an office alone and broke. So I probably felt really alone. I was like, where's all the people? And then I thought about that's left an impression. So then when I started to build websites, I'm like, where's the people who sell on a website? Like, we got to put the people back in the store. And that led to creating chat. And we literally designed them when it didn't exist. So myself and this woman, Sally Barton, she designed the windows. Because by the time we built chat, I had about 5 people working in the company. And we designed the windows and how they should look. And today, those windows exist today. Like that design is still like the design that you see by, across millions of websites.
And how is chat's gotten really smart. I know I wanted to talk about equal AI and just AI in general, but chat's got really smart, and you seem to have figured out how to make chat super smart so that big companies all over the world are using LivePerson to, basically improve engagement by like, multiples of percentages, right? And maybe instead of people talking to someone overseas that can be kind of frustrating sometimes, they're actually getting the answers they need in seconds by typing into the chat. So how is AI really, and where is it going to go from here, Rob?
Yeah, so 7 years ago, I kind of felt the chat business, web chat, wasn't going to really go the distance. Like about even our best customers, about 10% of people would chat and 90% would pick up the phone. And there's some dynamics of web chat that it's synchronous. Like you go and you have a messenger, you have a chat conversation. When you come back, almost it's like you have to start over again. Right. It's like it's not persistent. Like you don't have this ongoing connection with the brand, let's say, through that chat. So when messaging, 7 years ago, I started to see like messaging started to become real pervasive. I thought about what if we could back in the messaging platforms and use asynchronous messaging like we message with our friends and family. And then I thought about, from there, automation. Like if this really takes off, because consumers are already messaging, it's aligned to their consumer behavior, we're probably going to need a lot more automation because people aren't going to want to staff with humans. And it all has been playing out. So in some cases, we've removed 40, 50%, 70% of voice calls moved to messaging. We're doing things in retail today with like Dunkin' Donuts, or call themselves Dunkin', and Chipotle, and Signatures, and Lowe's, where they're selling hundreds of millions of dollars and stuff using messaging and automation and a bot. Like Chipotle has a bot called Pepper where you can build your burrito and everything, you pick it up at the door. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the arena today.
Well, I could spend a lot of more time talking to you. I'm sorry we had the little snafu, but I know you got to go. So I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today, Rob, and sharing your stories and being so personal about your stories. It's just that's inspirational. That's what I love. I mean, 50 grand in debt out of college on credit cards, and you're sleeping on a couch somewhere, taking a shower at the gym, and then 7 years later, you're something like that. You're taking your company public. That's freaking amazing, man.
Yeah, and then today we're about 1,300 employees, almost a $4 billion company market cap, and it's been a ride. And one of the things I'm trying to do now is give back to entrepreneurs. That's why I created my own podcast called Over the Wall, and I'm interviewing different guests and people I know, and because I really want entrepreneurs to understand. That's why I try to be pretty straightforward, like open about the conversation of being an entrepreneur. I feel like there's a lot of BS out there, especially there's a lot of motivational speaker people talking to entrepreneurs. Like it's all like get out of bed, it's a lot of superficial crap. And I find nothing. It's needed. You need that stuff, but I find a lot of that is those guys have never built businesses. A lot of those motivational people, they have like small businesses. As a matter of fact, their business is being motivational.
Their business is a speaking business. Yeah.
That's their business speaking business, but try to run like 5 people or 20 or 2,000 people or 200. Like and try to build a company over time, not from rags to riches in 1 week or like in 2 years. Right. And there's a lot of short-term thinking, and there's unfortunately a lot of misinformation for entrepreneurs. So what happens? You sit at home, you feel alone, and you feel like you're a loser. That's what happens. You're like, oh my God, this mistake happened. Like, I must be the only person in the world who hired the wrong sales leader. And I had to fire him or quit. And I'm embarrassed. And my company's not doing well. And I just wanted entrepreneurs to see that it's a mental game, that there are some rules to the mental game, that they have a journey they're on, and that they shouldn't feel alone, that we're all in it together and we all experience these very same things. So that I don't want, being an entrepreneur is a very lonely road. Yes. And it's great if people could think like there's a little Don Quixote in there. You know what I'm saying? There's like you, the horse, and the other guy. And got the other guy's name, just escaped my mind, the character of Don Quixote. But like you've got your friend. You've got your friend, and that's entrepreneurs, and that's myself. So I want people to understand that I'm out here. We're all out here together, taking the path.
Well, I love I'll listen to your podcast, Over the Wall. I love the name of that podcast. That's really cool. How long have you been doing that?
About 6 months. So I've done, I think we're up to 17 I've done of them or something. I've everyone from like Deepak Chopra to Ed Norton to Scott Kelly, the astronaut.
Oh, no kidding.
Um, yeah, I've had all different people. Lisa Bilou, who did the Quest bar. So I've got a lot of times we just talk about the mental game. Um, and so people can prepare themselves, to go out in the world and take the fight up.
I'm going to listen. Thanks, Rob. So liveperson.com is the website. What if people want to get a hold of you, Rob? Where do they connect with you?
So I'm on, I'm on all the social channels, and then if they want to, they can email me at rob@liveperson.com. So like entrepreneurs email me all the time, or get me on LinkedIn. Like I do look at LinkedIn at night, and I kind of, so if for some reason your email gets lost, just put it into LinkedIn or put it into rob@liveperson.com, and I'll be more than happy to help wherever I can. I was helped. I was very fortunate. I'm very fortunate to have some people in my life who really helped me, and there's a payback to it that I think is just, that I feel like I want to do.
Right. I love it. Rob, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How'd It Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at mikemalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How'd It Happen podcast.